Could the coffee brands you trust be hiding cancer warnings? 5 familiar ground coffees tied to Walmart shelves have been called out under California's Proposition 65. You will recognize the names: Chock full of nuts decaf, Hillsboro's, Melitta Premium Roast, and even concerns raised for Boyer's Organic and Trader Joe's Fairtrade blends. I'm Riley Cross. I spent years in emergency planning and public risk communication, and here on PrepWise, I keep these briefings calm, factual, and clear. Today, I'm laying out what the labels say, what the science shows, and what you can do. Here's the surprise. Independent testing found 100% of coffee samples contained acrylamide, a chemical that forms when beans are roasted. A staggering 95% of samples also contained toxins. A major roaster even states it plainly: chemicals known to cause cancer, including acrylamide, are present in coffee. That is why these warnings exist. It is not an added ingredient. It is produced by roasting. Over the next few minutes, I'll explain the law, the chemicals, each brand's issue, and safer choices. Which coffee brand do you drink daily? Let me know below. Quick recap. Some ground coffees carry Prop 65 warnings due to roasting byproducts like acrylamide and, in at least one decaf case, arsenic. We reviewed state filings and third-party testing to confirm this picture. Next, let's decode Prop 65 so the labels make sense. Why does a coffee bag need a cancer warning? California's Proposition 65, a 1986 law, requires a clear label if a product exposes you to a listed carcinogen or reproductive toxin above a very low threshold. Acrylamide and arsenic are both on that list. In 2018, California moved coffee squarely under this rule because roasting forms acrylamide. Roasters themselves acknowledge it. Boyer states chemicals known to cause cancer, including acrylamide, are present in coffee, and explains that acrylamide results from cooking. This is a legal warning, not a claim that 1 cup of coffee will harm you. The state's safe harbor limits are extremely conservative. In fact, the warning program has become a legal tug-of-war. In 2025, a federal court questioned blanket acrylamide warnings for food and found them unconstitutional for coffee, underscoring how strict and contested this is. So, if Prop 65 triggers these labels, what exactly are the chemicals it flags? One is baked into the roast itself, and one is a heavy metal that can appear from soil or processing. Quick recap. Prop 65 labels are about exposure thresholds to listed chemicals, not proof of acute danger. Coffee was pulled in because roasting forms acrylamide. Next, let's unpack acrylamide, how it forms, and what the risk looks like. What is acrylamide, and why is it in every roast? Acrylamide forms naturally when foods cook at high heat. It is part of the Maillard reaction, the same browning that makes toast taste toasty and beans taste like coffee. Testing confirms it shows up in all roasted coffee. 100% of samples contained some acrylamide. That is https://www.wmt.com.com/653353/text equals 100 the best choice because they. It is not added. Roasting creates it. Risk context matters. Very high doses cause cancer in lab animals and can affect nerves. But at diet levels, the FDA notes it is not thought to be toxic to humans at small levels. That is https://www.wmt.com.com/article/coffee-safety-contaminants-health-benefits/65653353/text equals temperatures such as when frying, the best choice because they. Coffee falls in that low exposure range for typical drinkers. Roast level also matters. Analyses found medium roasts tend to have the highest acrylamide, while dark roasts have the least, because acrylamide forms early and then breaks down with longer roasting. Same source. This explains why many coffees, even premium or organic, get flagged in California. If the acrylamide level clears their very low bar, a label follows. That does not mean the coffee is fake or adulterated. It means chemistry happened. Quick recap. Acrylamide forms in every roast, risk at normal intake is considered low, and darker roasts generally test lower. Next up, the other chemical you may see, arsenic. How does arsenic show up in coffee and what does it do? Arsenic is a naturally occurring element in soil and water. Plants can draw in trace amounts. Inorganic arsenic is classified as a known human carcinogen and is linked to skin, lung, and bladder cancers with long-term exposure. It can also stress the heart and other organs over time. In coffee, you might see arsenic warnings most often linked to decaf products. Why? Certain decaffeination steps involve water or solvents. If the water source or process isn't carefully controlled, trace metals can remain. California's Prop 65 threshold for inorganic arsenic exposure is extremely low, so tiny residues can trigger a label. That warning is about caution, not an emergency. A cup of coffee will not cause sudden arsenic poisoning, but if a product's tested exposure estimate rises above the state's strict limit, the brand must warn you. That is how the system works. Quick recap. Arsenic is a natural element, toxic with chronic exposure, and minute traces can prompt PP65 warnings, especially in some decaf coffees. With that context, let's look at the first named product on the list and why it drew attention. Number 1. Chock full of nuts decaf. Why did a classic decaf end up tied to an arsenic warning? Based on California Prop 65 filings and related reports, certain decaf batches were flagged because testing indicated inorganic arsenic above the state's very low warning threshold. This is not about an additive. It is about trace metal carryover, likely from water or a step in the decaf process. Here is what this means for you. The coffee is still coffee. The concern is long-term exposure, not a one-time risk. California requires a label when estimated daily exposure can exceed its conservative limit. If you drink a lot of decaf from one product every day, that label is meant to inform your choice. If you switch brands or methods, your exposure shifts too. As a former logistics planner, I look for root causes. In this case, I see process variables, not fraud. The solution is better process control and transparency on testing. Quick recap. Chock full of nuts decaf was linked to an arsenic warning under Prop 65, pointing to trace metal residues from processing, not to fillers. Next, a different issue with a big brand, acrylamide in a standard roast. Number 2, Hillsbraw's ground coffee. What triggered its cancer warning? Acrylamide. Like all roasted coffee, Hillsbraw's forms acrylamide during roasting. Evidence suggests its roast profile exceeded California's low safe harbor level, which then requires a Prop 65 label. This is not about a strange ingredient. It is straightforward roast chemistry. Remember the key finding: 100% of coffee samples tested contained some acrylamide. That's wmtw.com/article/coffee safety, contaminants, toxins, health benefits /656331//au.txdect. Also note the mitigation insight. Darker roasts have less acrylamide than medium roasts in comparative tests. Same source. If you enjoy Hillsbraw's but want to lower acrylamide exposure, a dark roast variant is the better pick. As we built this briefing, we cross-checked industry data and third-party tests against Prop 65 notices to validate the pattern. The warning follows the chemistry, not the brand name. Quick recap. Hillsbraw's earned an acrylamide warning because medium roasts can exceed California's strict limit. Darker roasts generally test lower. If this kind of clear, calm breakdown helps you, please subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next briefing. Now, let's look at Melitta's Premium Roast. Number 3, Melitta Premium Roast. The name says premium, so why the warning? Again, acrylamide. Premium describes marketing and bean selection, not the chemistry of roasting. If a medium or medium-dark profile holds higher acrylamide, California requires a label. Tests summarized by Consumer Reporting show medium roasts trend higher in acrylamide, while dark roasts trend lower. From a risk view, normal coffee intake remains low exposure for most people. FDA guidance notes acrylamide in small amounts from food is not thought to be toxic to humans. Same source. So this label is a cautious notice, not a panic sign. If you like Melitta, you can reduce potential exposure by choosing their darker roasts or adjusting how long you brew to avoid burnt flavors. We verified this finding by reviewing public Prop 65 lists and mapping them to widely sold roast profiles. The pattern repeats across brands. Quick recap. Melitta's warning aligns with the same acrylamide story. Chemistry, not contamination. Next, let's test a common belief. Do organic and fair trade coffees avoid these labels? Number 4, Boyer's Organic. You might expect organic coffee to escape these warnings. It does not. Boyer's posts the notice themselves. Chemicals known to cause cancer, including acrylamide, are present in coffee, and they explain the chemical forms during roasting. Here's where that link to the California requires the following notice: baked goods and snack foods. Organic refers to farming practices. It does not change what heat does to sugars and amino acids in the bean. So if you see a Prop 65 tag on an organic bag, that label is consistent with the science. It does not mean pesticides were used. It means roasting happened. And as we have seen, darker roasts generally test lower for acrylamide than medium roasts, according to comparative testing. Here's that second link from the article. My read: seek transparency. If a roaster publishes third-party test data, that builds trust. If they do not, favor roast profiles more likely to run lower. Quick recap. Even organic coffee like Boyer's carries acrylamide warnings because roasting creates the chemical. Labels reflect process chemistry, not farming claims. Next, the fifth example shows the same rule applies across retailers. Number 5, Trader Joe's Fairtrade blends. Fairtrade sounds safer, but it is about ethics and pricing for growers, not about roasting chemistry. Trader Joe's has even been named in a Prop 65 acrylamide notice for a product under its label, 2017, showing the law applies to big names too. And if any specific coffee roast exceeds California's threshold, a warning is required, regardless of Fairtrade status. The same mitigation applies. Darker roasts tend to carry less acrylamide than medium roasts, based on comparative testing summaries. And remember, at typical levels, acrylamide from food is not thought to be toxic to humans. Same source. The label is a signal to be informed, not to panic. Our review compared company statements and legal notices with lab summaries to ensure we are not overstating claims. The pattern holds. Labels follow chemistry. Quick recap. Fair trade labels do not change the roasting reaction. Trader Joe's has faced Prop 65 acrylamide notices, demonstrating no brand is immune. With the 5 examples covered, let's talk about what these chemicals actually do over time. If coffee contains acrylamide or, in some decaf cases, arsenic, should you worry? Let's separate risk from fear. Inorganic arsenic is a known human carcinogen. Chronic exposure raises risks for skin, lung, and bladder cancers and can affect the heart and other organs. That is why even small ongoing exposures, like from contaminated water, are taken seriously by public health agencies. Acrylamide is different. At very high doses, it causes cancer in rodents and can damage nerves. But the food levels most people get from coffee, toast, or chips are far lower. FDA guidance reflects this. Acrylamide from food is not thought to be toxic to humans at small levels. California's Prop 65 uses very conservative thresholds to set warnings, so many products get labeled even when real-world risk is small. It is also true that coffee carries benefits, antioxidants, metabolic effects, and, for many, better alertness. On balance, moderate coffee intake is considered safe by most experts. Quick recap. Arsenic warrants caution at chronic exposure. Acrylamide at food levels appears to be a small risk. Labels lean conservative. Now, here are practical steps to keep enjoying coffee while dialing down potential exposure. What can you do with your coffee habit now that you know this? Start with your roast. Darker roasts generally carry less acrylamide than medium roasts, according to comparative testing summaries. If you drink decaf, choose Swiss water or CO2 processed decaf. Those methods avoid chemical solvents and focus on clean process control. Brew wisely. Do not over-extract or scorch grounds. If it tastes burnt, you likely pushed heat and time too far. Keep intake reasonable. Most people can enjoy 1 to 3 cups a day without concern. The big risks with acrylamide show up at far higher doses than diet provides. Finally, look for brands that publish third-party lab data or carry independent certifications that include contaminant testing. You do not need to quit coffee. You just need to make informed choices. Quick recap: pick darker roasts, choose gentle decaf methods, avoid burnt brews, and moderate your intake. If you found this helpful, a quick like helps more people see it. Now let's close with the bottom line and the key takeaways you can use tomorrow morning. What is the bottom line for your morning cup? These warnings are about chemistry, not fakery. Coffee is still coffee. Prop 65 labels appear because roasting creates acrylamide, and in some decaf cases, testing has found trace arsenic. We saw that across 5 examples: Chock full of nuts decaf tied to arsenic concerns, Hillsboro's and Melitta flagged for acrylamide, and even Boyer's Organic and Trader Joe's Fairtrade blends affected by the same rules. Every coffee tested contains some acrylamide, and roasters themselves say acrylamide is present in coffee. The FDA notes these small amounts are not thought to be toxic to humans. Your smart moves are simple. Favor darker roasts, pick clean decaf methods, avoid burnt brews, and keep portions moderate. That is how you lower exposure without losing your routine. Which point made you think twice? Comment below. I'll read as many as I can. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to PrepWise for calm, evidence-based briefings that help you shop and prep with confidence. We will keep digging into filings, lab reports, and industry archives so you always have the facts. Stay informed, choose well, and move forward with clarity.